May 8th, 2025. You should probably mark that date. Cardinal Robert Prevost of Chicago becomes Pope Leo XIV.
Yeah, the first American ever to hold that
I
office.
mean, think about the sheer scale of that. Someone from the United States now leading, well, a global institution, over 1 billion
It's
followers.
genuinely historic.
Hmm.
Really shifts the landscape of the Catholic Church after, what, centuries of popes, mostly from Europe.
Exactly, a real turning of the page.
Hmm.
But almost right away, the celebration got sort of mixed with some very serious concerns.
Right. Survivor groups for clergy molestation victims came forward pretty quickly.
Yeah, pointing to Pope Leo XIV's history, specifically how he handled abuse allegations, both here in the U.S. and during his time as a bishop in Peru.
And that creates this immediate tension, doesn't it? You have this landmark election, this historic moment.
Happening right alongside these incredibly serious accusations and concerns.
Exactly. That's really the core of what we need to explore here. It's, layered, historical significance meeting. Well, profound human suffering.
We need to understand both sides, the background of this new pope, and also the very real anxieties of people who've been harmed.
Definitely.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together information from a pretty wide range of sources. We're looking at The Guardian, People, The Daily Beast, them, and various other reports to try and, get under the surface. Our goal really is to understand the key parts. What are the specific concerns being raised? What's the context of Pope Leo XIV's past? And maybe what his papacy might signal for the future.
And there were those interesting initial reactions, too, like his very brief message to the U.S.
Right. That just suggests there's a lot more to unpack here. Okay, let's get into it.
Okay. So let's start by tracing the path that led Robert Prevost to become pope, born in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
His early career was really rooted in the Augustinian religious order. He eventually led their Chicago province.
And then later, Peru. From 2015 to 2023, he was a bishop in Chiclayo.
Correct. And his election as Pope Leo XIV on May 8th came, well, relatively quickly after Pope Francis passed away on April 21st.
The election process itself, the conclave, it's quite something, isn't it?
It really is.
You have all these cardinals. They have to be under 80, locked away basically in the Sistine Chapel.
Sequestered, yeah.
Yeah.
Until they reach that two-thirds majority.
And then the smoke signals. Black smoke for no pope, white smoke when they've chosen. It feels almost, I don't know, ancient in today's world.
It's a very deliberate process, steeped in tradition. The idea is to foster, prayer and independent thinking for the electors.
And Prevost's selection, it seems like it was a bit unexpected for many people watching.
Reportedly, yes. Somewhat unexpected. His reputation back in Peru as a kind of moderating influence, that's been suggested as maybe a factor that appealed to the College of Cardinals.
Interesting. And his choice of name, Leo XIV.
That connects him back to Pope Leo XIII, who's really remembered for his focus on social justice issues.
Okay, which makes the concerns coming from survivor groups maybe even more pointed. Let's dig into those specific allegations now, starting with his time with the Augustinians in Chicago.
Right.
And then we can move on to Peru. The case involving Father Richard McGrath, he was a priest and a high school principal. That seems key in Chicago.
Yes, and the troubling part here is that during the time Prevost was leading the Augustinian Order's Midwest province, these allegations surfaced about Fra McGrath.
Allegations of what exactly?
Claims of molesting a student and also possessing child abuse material. And reports suggest that despite these allegations, McGrath was allowed to continue in his role.
Okay, but here's where it gets a bit complicated, right? The Augustinian Order, they have a different version of the timeline.
They do. They've put out statements saying that the formal allegations against McGrath didn't actually surface until after Prevost had finished his leadership role there.
And that the alleged abuse itself happened before Prevost was even involved?
That's their position, yes. But it's also on the record that the order eventually paid a pretty significant settlement, $2 million to the survivor, Robert Krankich.
Who has since passed away, sadly.
Yes. And McGrath was eventually dismissed, but not until December 2024.
So even if the timeline is disputed, does that eventual settlement suggest maybe there was a deeper issue within the order around that time, or how things were handled?
That's a really crucial question, I think. The specifics of when allegations were formally reported are definitely important. But the fact that the order ultimately felt a substantial settlement was needed, well, it does raise questions about how these things were handled and the overall environment back then.
Then there's another case in Chicago involving Father James Ray.
Right, a priest who already had a history of abuse allegations and restrictions placed on him.
And reportedly, he was allowed to live at an Augustinian friary in Chicago near an elementary school, while Prevost was the provincial leader.
Exactly. And this, as you can imagine, caused significant concern for SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests.
Understandably, their worry was about the potential risk to kids nearby.
Absolutely. Now, the Vatican reportedly stated that Prevost didn't actually authorize Father Ray living there.
Okay.
But the fact remains, it happened under his leadership, which is why it still prompts scrutiny from survivor advocacy groups.
Right. Okay, let's shift focus now to Peru, where Prevost was the bishop in Chiclayo. There, we have three women accusing two priests, Father Eleuterio Vasquez Gonzalez and Father Ricardo Yeskin.
Yes, accusing them of sexual abuse when the women were minors.
And what's the main concern raised by these women?
Their primary claim is that despite trying to report the abuse, they felt there wasn't any sort of meaningful investigation into what they were saying.
They felt ignored?
Essentially, yes. They even presented photos apparently showing Father Vasquez celebrating Mass.
Even though they'd been told he was suspended?
Exactly. Seemingly contradicting assurances they'd received.
So what does the Diocese of Chiclayo say about this?
Well, their position is that the Vatican looked into it and concluded there wasn't enough evidence to fully substantiate the allegations,
Okay.
and that local law enforcement also couldn't prosecute because the statute of limitations had passed. The diocese also maintains that Bishop Prevost did meet with the women, that he encouraged them to take civil legal action, and offered psychological help.
But one of the accusers, Anna Maria Quispe, her words were quite powerful, weren't they? Feeling abandoned, saying the church failed to protect them.
They really were powerful. It just highlights that deep gap, that chasm of distrust that exists for so many survivors, even if legal or church processes reach a certain conclusion.
The lived experience, the emotional impact is still there.
Profoundly so.
Yeah.
And adding to this, bishopaccountability.org, which tracks these things, noted that Bishop Prevost didn't publish a list of clergy credibly accused of abuse while he led the diocese in Peru.
Which is a practice many other dioceses have adopted now
Yeah.
for transparency.
Yes, exactly, in the interest of greater transparency.
So when you put all this background together, it's maybe not so surprising that groups like SNAP and SCSA, the survivors of childhood sex abuse, reacted so strongly, voicing grave concern, feeling insulted even.
Their reaction is absolutely a direct reflection of these past experiences. And it reflects a deeply held belief that the church, as an institution, hasn't yet adequately dealt with the systemic issues that allowed abuse to happen and, well, persist.
Didn't SNAP actually file a complaint against him earlier this year before he became pope?
They did, yes, back in March. They used a specific church law that allows for disciplinary action against bishops who've been negligent in handling abuse.
So while that didn't stop his election, it definitely signals the level of distrust.
Absolutely, and it signals the significant expectations they now have for his papacy.
And they've laid out some very clear demands, haven't they?
Yes, they're urging Pope Leo XIV to implement what they call a true zero-tolerance policy, meaning real consequences, consistently applied. They also want tangible reparations for survivors, and they're calling for a global truth commission to really account for the full history of abuse within the church.
And Mitchell Garabedian, the attorney, his point was stark child safety has to come first.
Yes, he emphasized that the safety and well-being of children must be paramount, more important than any desire to protect the church's image or reputation.
These demands, they really represent what survivor groups have been asking for a long time, don't they? Genuine accountability, real transparency.
And a demonstrable commitment to preventing future harm. They're looking for concrete actions, things that show a fundamental shift in how the church addresses this crisis.